March 26, 1970, War Zone C, South Vietnam. 1100 hours. The jungle air hangs thick with moisture and the metallic smell of fear. 4 kilometers from the Cambodian border, in a region American soldiers grimly call the Dog's Face, 100 men of Charlie Company, 2nd Battalion, 8th Cavalry, 1st Cavalry Division are dying. They stumbled into something they didn't expect. A hidden North Vietnamese army stronghold, fortified bunker complex buried so deep in the jungle canopy that helicopters cannot penetrate. Artillery shells explode harmlessly in the triple canopy trees. Air support cannot distinguish friend from foe through the dense vegetation. The radio crackles with desperate voices. Outnumbered 6-1, maybe worse. Ammunition running low, casualties mounting. The company commander knows the arithmetic of their situation. 30 minutes, maybe less, then annihilation. 25-year-old Captain John Poindexter, commanding Alpha Troop, 1st Squadron, 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, intercepts the desperate transmissions. 200 men under his command, M113 armored personnel carriers, M551 Sheridan tanks, M48 Patton tanks. No orders to move. No roads to follow. Just thick jungle and the certainty that 100 American soldiers will die if someone doesn't do something. Now, Poindexter makes the decision that will define the rest of his life. Saddle up. We're going in. What his men don't know, what Charlie Company doesn't know, what the North Vietnamese army doesn't know, is that the mathematics of destruction are already in motion. 200 men are about to create their own road through 4 kilometers of jungle that no human being should be able to penetrate. And when those aluminum-hulled machines finally burst from the tree line, their 50 caliber machine guns roaring, the Vietnamese will witness something they thought impossible. The Green Dragons are coming, and nothing can stop them. The story begins not in the jungles of Vietnam, but in the corporate laboratories of San Jose, California, where in the mid-1950s, engineers at FMC Corporation faced an impossible problem. The United States Army needed a vehicle that could swim across rivers, fly in cargo planes, survive enemy fire, and cost less than $10,000. Every solution violated the laws of physics. Armor meant weight. Weight meant slow. Slow meant dead. Steel meant heavy. Heavy meant it couldn't swim. Light meant vulnerable. The circle seemed impossible to square. In 1954, the Detroit Arsenal began considering a lightweight vehicle family with a common chassis. By September of that year, Army Field Forces produced an outline for what they called the Airborne Armored Multi-Purpose Vehicle Family. In January 1956, Continental Army Command approved development. October 1956 brought the completion of a mock-up for the T-113. For 3 years, between 1956 and 1959, engineers tested prototypes. An aluminum T-113 competed against a steel T-117. The steel version followed conventional wisdom. Armor meant steel, always had, always would. But the aluminum vehicle weighed less while offering the same protection. On April 2, 1959, the T-113E2 received official designation as M113, Standard A. In January 1960, full production began. By 1961, the first M113s arrived in United States Army Europe to replace the aging M59 armored personnel carriers. The specifications seemed almost modest on paper. 15 feet, 11.5 inches long, 8 feet 10 inches wide, 8 feet 2¼ inches tall, empty weight of 18,600 pounds. Combat loaded 22,900 pounds. 13.5 tons of aluminum alloy moving at 40 miles per hour on roads, 3.5 miles per hour through water using only its tracks for propulsion. The hull constructed from 5083 aircraft quality aluminum alloy welded together with revolutionary techniques. Roof armor measured 38 millimeters thick, sides 44.5 millimeters, front 38 millimeters. The floor, the thinnest section, just 28.6 millimeters. Designed to stop 7.62 millimeter small arms fire and shell fragments. Nothing more, nothing less. Inside the original M113, a Chrysler 75 M-Vate gasoline engine produced 209 horsepower through an Allison TX 100-to-1 3-speed automatic transmission. 2 crew members, driver and commander, could transport 11 fully equipped infantrymen. A single 50 caliber M2 Browning heavy machine gun mounted on a pintle atop the commander's cupola, range of 300 miles from 95 gallons of gasoline. The revolutionary aspect wasn't the specifications, it was what they enabled. An armored vehicle that could be loaded onto a C-130 Hercules transport, dropped by parachute, driven directly into rivers without preparation. Crossed rice paddies that would swallow tanks, all for $22,000 per vehicle. Critics emerged immediately. Aluminum armor? Madness. The M75 before it used steel and weighed 18 tons. Sure, it was slower, had half the range, required 2 unreliable engines, but at least it was proven. The M59, 19 tons of steel, at least felt substantial. This new vehicle seemed like a toy, lightweight, probably fragile, definitely untested. The old guard whispered their doubts in Pentagon corridors. When this thing meets real combat, those aluminum panels will peel back like tin cans. The gasoline engine will turn it into a rolling crematorium. The exposed machine gunner will last about 30 seconds under fire. Mark our words, this is going to be a disaster. But there was a war starting, a different kind of war. Jungles and rice paddies and rivers and swamps. A place where tanks bogged down in mud, where roads disappeared during monsoon season, where the enemy melted into vegetation so thick that infantry moved at a crawl. Vietnam needed something different, something that could move, something that could fight, something that, against all conventional wisdom, might actually work. On March 30th, 1962, 32 M113s arrived in South Vietnam. They were distributed to 2 Army of the Republic of Vietnam mechanized rifle companies, 15 APCs each, the 4th and 5th mechanized rifle squadrons of the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment. On June 11th, 1962, these 2 mechanized units fielded for the first time in combat operations. What nobody expected was what happened next. The Army of the Republic of Vietnam commanders looked at these aluminum boxes on tracks and ignored everything the American advisors told them. The M113 was designed as a battle taxi. Drive to the edge of combat, drop the infantry, retreat to safety, let the ground troops fight. That was doctrine. That was sensible. That was how armored personnel carriers worked. The Vietnamese commanders had a different idea. Why get out? The thing has a 50 caliber machine gun. It can swim through rice paddies. It moves 40 miles per hour. Let's charge. The American advisors watched in horror and disbelief as ARVN crews kept their infantry mounted and drove straight at Viet Cong positions. Across flooded rice paddies where no vehicle should operate, through streams and canals, the aluminum hulls smashing through vegetation, the 50 caliber machine guns hammering away, and the Viet Cong, they ran. A 1965 Rand Corporation report based on interviews with hundreds of captured Viet Cong prisoners, documented what happened in those early months. The guerrillas fled when confronted by what the Vietnamese began calling them, Rồng Xanh, the Green Dragons. Several instances were cited where Viet Cong units had panicked and suffered heavy losses when attacked by the M113. The combination was overwhelming. Armor, speed, mounted 50 caliber machine guns, ability to traverse terrain that should have been impassable. The Green Dragon seemed unstoppable. The American advisors filed their reports with a mixture of pride and concern. Pride because the vehicle was working beyond expectations. Concern because this aggressive mounted combat doctrine violated everything the M113 was designed to do. The exposed machine gunner remained vulnerable. The thin aluminum armor could stop rifle rounds, but nothing heavier. The gasoline engine was a fire hazard. This success couldn't last. And on January 2nd, 1963, their concerns became reality. Ap Bac hamlet, Dinh Thuong Province, 40 miles southwest of Saigon, January 2nd, 1963. The rice paddies stretched green and endless under the morning sun. Lieutenant Colonel John Paul Vann, Senior U.S., advisor to the ARVN 7th Infantry Division, watches from a helicopter as the operation unfolds. 1,400 ARVN troops, 13 M113 APCs, air support, artillery, against 320 to 350 Viet Cong of the 261st and 514 battalions. 4-to-1 odds in favor of government forces. This should be textbook. What Van doesn't know yet is that this will become a textbook, just not the kind anyone wanted. The Viet Cong commander, Hai Hoang, has done something unusual. Instead of the usual hit-and-run tactics, his forces have prepared defensive positions with almost academic precision. Deep foxholes, interlocking fields of fire, heavy weapons positioned to cover likely approach routes. When the M113s approach the landing zone, they come in single file instead of formation. The lead vehicle rumbles forward. The Viet Cong hold their fire. Discipline. Wait. The second vehicle. The third. Now they're in the killing zone. Machine guns open up. Not random fire. Concentrated fire. The exposed ARVN gunners, standing from the waist up behind their 50 caliber machine guns, have nowhere to hide. The first gunner jerks backward as bullets find him. The second, the third. The heavy M113s approach the Cong Ba Kai Canal and discover it's deeper than expected. 10 tons of aluminum and steel, and men sink into the mud. Crews have to dismount to cut brush and trees to fill the canal. While they work, exposed Viet Cong machine guns cut them down. One driver, head outside the hatch for better visibility, takes a round and slumps dead in his seat. Commander Ba, inside his carrier, gets knocked unconscious by the concussion of nearby explosions. When the M113s finally close on their objective, a Viet Cong squad leader and his men jump from their foxholes with grenades. The aluminum armor that stops bullets cannot stop the explosive force at point-blank range. By the time the smoke clears, 14 of the gunners aboard the M113s are dead. 14 young men who stood exposed because that's where the gun was mounted, 80 plus ARVN soldiers killed, 100 plus wounded, 3 American advisors dead, including Captain Kenneth Good, 8 Americans wounded, 5 helicopters shot down. The Viet Cong, 18 dead, 39 wounded. They withdrew on their own terms after holding the ground all day. Lieutenant Colonel Van files his after-action report with words that cut like knives. This operation was a failure. The U.S. Army Command in the Pacific sends a report to the Joint Chiefs. This was one of the bloodiest and costliest battles of the South Vietnam War. This will provide the enemy with a morale-building victory. On January 7, 1963, Neil Sheehan of the Washington Post reports that angry United States military advisors charged that Vietnamese infantrymen refused direct orders to advance. One American advisor at the battlefield later notes that the Viet Cong has selected fighting positions with great care. It looked like a school solution from the infantry training school at Fort Benning on how a unit should prepare a defensive position. The age of the Green Dragon's invincibility has ended after just 7 months. Now begins the age of adaptation. The first field modifications appear within months. The ARVN 80th Ordnance Unit and 2nd Armored Cavalry begin fabricating gun shields. The first attempts use steel salvaged from sunken ship hulls. Inadequate. The steel is too thin, too brittle. Later, shields come from scrapped armored vehicles. Better. Much better. These crude modifications become the predecessor to what will eventually be standardized. But standardization takes time. Years. Meanwhile, the Viet Cong are learning too. By summer 1963, 57mm recoilless rifles appear. In autumn, their use rises dramatically. September 1963 brings the first 75mm recoilless rifle. December 1963 sees the first M113 damaged by this weapon. The hollow charge heat rounds easily penetrate the thin aluminum hull. 1.7 inches of aluminum that stops rifle bullets peels open like paper against shaped charges. 1964 brings the RPG-2, the Soviet-designed rocket-propelled grenade. Chinese copies called the B-40 Flood, in from the north. 82mm warheads, effective range 150 meters, penetration up to 7 inches of armor. Against the M113's maximum of 1.7 to 5 inches, the result is catastrophic. But the deadliest weapon isn't shaped charges or recoilless rifles. It's buried in the ground. Mines, command-detonated mines, anti-vehicle mines, buried artillery rounds, improvised explosive devices crafted from unexploded American ordnance. The thin aluminum floor, just over 1 inch thick, cannot deflect explosive blasts. Between November 1967 and March 1970, a span of just 28 months, U.S. and ARVN forces lose at least 1,342 M113s to landmines alone, not counting losses to recoilless rifles, not counting RPG hits, just mines. 73% of all vehicle losses come from explosives buried in the earth. The gasoline engine adds horror to mathematics. When an M113 hits a mine, the floor ruptures upward. Fuel lines rupture. Gasoline sprays across hot metal and exposed electrical systems. Crewmen inside the aluminum box have seconds to escape before fire consumes everything. Some make it, most don't. The crews adapt by piling sandbags on the floor, 2 layers deep if they can manage it. Sandbags arranged as parapets around the troop compartment. Anything to absorb blast force. Anything to buy seconds. They remove the commander's and driver's seats, placing C-ration crates in the cupolas instead. Softer. They take off the track shrouds and mud flaps to make repairs faster. Every modification trades one vulnerability for another. More sandbags mean more weight. More weight means slower. Slower means easier targets. Remove armor to speed repairs. But remove armor and you're more exposed. Nothing is free. Every choice costs lives. By 1965, the Viet Cong published a training manual, Attack on M113 APC. The document details best weapons, optimal tactics, vulnerable points, recommended engagement ranges. The systematic study of how to kill the Green Dragon. What once caused panic now invites careful planning. American intelligence finds the manual and reads it with growing concern. The enemy isn't running anymore. They're studying, learning, adapting faster than anticipated. The phrase appears in multiple after-action reports. The enemy has learned to respect but not fear the M113. Respect because it can still kill them. Not fear because they know how to kill it back. The balance has shifted. Something has to change. April 1963 brings the first solution to one critical problem. The gasoline engine that turns hits into crematoriums gets replaced. The Detroit Diesel 6V53 V6 two-stroke diesel engine, 212 horsepower, slightly more than the gasoline version. Displacement of 318 cubic inches. Designated M113A1. The fire risk drops dramatically. Diesel fuel doesn't explode the way gasoline does. Crews can breathe a little easier, but the exposed gunner remains exposed. The thin aluminum remains thin. The floor remains vulnerable. By July 1st, 1968, most U.S. M113s have been converted to diesel. The ARVN vehicles follow gradually. One problem solved, many remain. The real transformation begins not in American factories, but in American motor pools, field modifications. Troops doing what troops always do when official solutions come too slowly. The ARVN gun shields catch attention. In 1965, U.S. production of shield kits begins. Factories in the United States and Okinawa start churning out standardized components. The 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, the Black Horse Regiment, adopts a specific configuration. Commander's 50 caliber M2 Browning gets an armored gun shield. Full 360-degree protection, 2 side positions added, 7.62 millimeter M60 machine guns, each with its own gun shield, armored hatches. The configuration requires 6 crew members, driver, track commander, 2 gunners, 2 loaders, 1 with an M79 grenade launcher. The ammunition load changes everything. 50 caliber rounds, 2,200 of them. M60 ammunition stacked 2 layers deep, wall to wall in the troop compartment. Space fills with crew kit bags, spare gun barrels, water, sea rations, crew weapons, grenades, toolbox, towing cables. The vehicle transforms from personnel carrier to weapons platform. In January 1967, Operation Cedar Falls marks the first large-scale use of this configuration in combat. 30,000 U.S. and ARVN troops sweep through the Iron Triangle, 20 kilometers north of Saigon. The M113s move in herringbone formations, vehicles angled to provide all-round firepower. When ambushes come, and they always come, the 3-gun configuration proves devastating. 750 Viet Cong killed, 280 captured. U.S. losses, 72 killed, 337 wounded. The mathematics improve. By 1968, this configuration receives official designation, a KIT, the Armored Cavalry Assault Vehicle, ACAV. The name change reflects reality. This is no longer a personnel carrier. This is a fighting vehicle. The age of the battle taxi has ended. The age of mounted combat has begun. March 21st, 1967, near Suoi Tre, War Zone C, Tay Ninh Province, 90 kilometers northwest of Saigon. Fire Support Base Gold. The 3rd Battalion, 22nd Infantry Regiment, under Lieutenant Colonel John A. Bender, establishes position on March 19th. The 2nd Battalion, 77th Artillery Regiment, under Lieutenant Colonel John William Vesey Jr., who will later become chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, provides fire support. At 0631 hours, 650 mortar rounds impact the base, 60 millimeter, 82 millimeter. Explosions walk through defensive positions with methodical precision. Then the infantry assault, the Viet Cong, 272nd Main Force Regiment, 9th Division, 2,500 men in 6 battalions, one of the best organized and equipped VC units in the war. They hit the northeastern, eastern, southeastern perimeter. By 0700 hours, positions are penetrated. By 0815, Company B's 1st platoon is overrun. Artillery fires beehive rounds. Each shell contains 8,000 fin steel projectiles, firing at point-blank range. Trees shred, earth erupts, bodies disintegrate. The 2nd Battalion, 77th Artillery fires 2,200 rounds, 40 of them beehive. Gun crews work until barrels glow red. The perimeter holds by thread thickness. Then at 0912 hours, the tree line to the left rear erupts with mechanical thunder. M113s of the 2nd Battalion, 22nd Infantry Regiment mechanized under Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Julian, and tanks of the 2nd Battalion, 34th Armor Regiment under Lieutenant Colonel Raymond L. Staley crashed through vegetation at full speed. An eyewitness describes a platoon of M113s bursting from the trees and racing across the landing zone directly into the midst of the enemy. The vehicles mount 90mm guns firing canister rounds. Machine guns rake Viet Cong caught in the open. The M113s charge through friend and foe alike, crushing, shooting, scattering the assault. By 0930, the perimeter is secured. The body count staggers. 647 confirmed Viet Cong dead. Intelligence estimates another 200 killed and evacuated by their comrades. U.S. Casualties: 31 to 36 killed, 187 to 190 wounded. Kill ratio exceeds 20 to 1. This becomes the highest body count of enemy in a one-day battle in Vietnam to that date. The participating units receive the Presidential Unit Citation. The mechanized relief force becomes legend. But the more significant story is what the relief demonstrates. The M113 has evolved from target to weapon, from vulnerable to viable, from liability to asset. The transformation is not complete. It will never be complete. But the trajectory has changed. August 18, 1966. Long Tan Rubber Plantation, Phuoc Tuy Province, South Vietnam. D Company, 6th Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment. 108 men under Major Harry Smith. 3 New Zealand artillery observers. Heavy monsoon rains reduce visibility to meters. At 1540 hours, 11 platoon under 2nd Lieutenant Gordon Sharp contacts a large enemy force. The company finds itself nearly surrounded. The Viet Cong 275th Regiment, largely North Vietnamese Army regulars, plus D-445 Provincial Mobile Battalion. Total enemy force estimated between 1,500 and 2,500 troops. 15 to 1 odds against the Australians. 1/3 of D Company becomes casualties. Ammunition runs critically low. Air support impossible through the weather. Artillery helps but cannot save them. The company commander radios for rescue. If you don't come for us in half an hour, don't bother coming at all. At 1850 hours, through the murk and rain and bullets, a dull roar builds, like bulldozers. No one knows what it is. Then realization strikes. The tracks, 3 Troop, 1st APC Squadron, Lieutenant Adrian Roberts commanding, 9 M113s, having already swum a flooded river with Company B of 6th RAR aboard. At 1855, the M113s were formed into wide assault formation, lights blazing, 50 caliber machine guns going full bore, 7.62 millimeter machine guns firing. They charged through artillery fire at the VC battalion, forming to assault D Company's rear. The surprise flank attack shatters the assault. The surviving members of D Company stand and cheer. One Australian soldier later describes feeling like one of those Yankees saved from the Indians. 18 Australians killed, including one from 1st APC Squadron. 24 wounded. Viet Cong losses, 245 confirmed dead. Later intelligence indicates 878 killed, 1,500 wounded. President Lyndon B. Johnson awards D Company the U.S. Presidential Unit Citation. Only 2 Australian units in history received this decoration. August 18th becomes Vietnam Veterans Day in Australia. The pattern repeats across the years. November 11, 1965 at Ap Bac, multiple engagements demonstrating ACAV firepower. April through June 1970, the Cambodian incursion. The 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment spearheads the attack across the Cambodian border. They battle 60-plus kilometers to capture the town of Snuol. Devastating blow to North Vietnamese logistics. Last major U.S. ground combat operation. The M113 proves itself again and again as workhorse, weapons platform, lifesaver. But the losses mount too. Every success carries a butcher's bill in aluminum and flesh. By the latter stages of the war, soldiers frequently preferred to ride atop the vehicle behind sandbag castles rather than await uncertain fate inside. The mathematics of survival shift. Outside, you might get shot. Inside, if you hit a mine, the floor ruptures upward and fire consumes everything in seconds. Outside gives you a chance to jump clear. A slim chance, but a chance. The crews pile sandbags higher. Remove anything that adds weight but not protection. Strap extra ammunition to the outside. Layer their workspace with C-ration boxes, spare parts, anything that might absorb shrapnel. Turn their vehicle into a moving fortress and junkyard combined. One veteran describes the interior. Hot during the day, cold during monsoon season, cramped, loud. The diesel engine roar combines with track clatter and wind and radio chatter into constant noise. The smell of diesel fuel, gun oil, unwashed bodies, fear. Pulling guard duty awake 2 hours, sleep 2 hours. For weeks straight, the vehicle becomes home, weapon, coffin, all at once. The enemy adapts too. The early panic at Green Dragons transforms into systematic counter-tactics. The 1965 training manual becomes 1968 field practice. RPG-7 launchers with doubled range and tripled armor penetration. Mines become the weapon of choice. Not random placement, but careful positioning along likely routes. Command detonated for maximum effect. The asymmetry remains. America possesses the technology. North Vietnam possesses the patience. The M113 can move 40 miles per hour. A buried mine waits forever. The aluminum can stop bullets. Explosives don't care. The diesel engine won't catch fire easily, but aluminum burns hot when it finally catches. Every advantage carries a counter. Every protection reveals a weakness. The war becomes a competition of adaptation. Who learns faster? Who modifies quicker? Who survives the learning curve? March 26, 1970. Return to where this story began. Captain John Poindexter and Alpha Troop have intercepted the desperate radio calls from Charlie Company. 100 men surrounded in War Zone C. No roads, no time, no choice. The order goes out, saddle up. 200 men mount their M113s, Sheridans, Pattons. The vehicles form up not on a road because there are no roads. They form up facing jungle. 4 kilometers of jungle. Dense vegetation that helicopters cannot penetrate. Trees that artillery cannot reach through. Undergrowth that infantry measure in meters per hour, not miles. Poindexter's decision will either save 100 men or kill 300. There is no middle ground. The lead vehicle surges forward. Tracks bite into soft earth. The aluminum hull smashes into bamboo thicket. The vegetation resists, then breaks. The vehicle behind follows through the gap. Then the next. Then the next. 200 men. Dozens of vehicles. Creating a road by destroying everything in front of them. The sound carries kilometers. The grinding of tracks, the crack of breaking trees, the roar of diesel engines pushed to maximum. Inside the vehicles, crews can see nothing but green pressed against vision blocks. Navigation by compass and radio and faith. Outside, any North Vietnamese unit within hearing range knows something massive is coming. Could be a trap, could be an ambush forming, could be mines waiting. The vehicles keep moving. They cannot stop. If they stop, they're targets. Movement is life. Movement is mission. Movement is the only option. The mathematics of rescue calculate in minutes. Charlie Company holds on by fingernails and training and desperate courage. Artillery keeps falling, but it's not enough. Air support circles overhead but cannot engage through the canopy. The radio calls become more urgent, then more desperate, then quiet, not silence, never silence. But the tone changes from please hurry to if you're coming, come now. Alpha Troop plows through the green hell. Branches scrape aluminum hulls. Roots catch on tracks. The vehicles surge over obstacles that should stop them. 4 kilometers. In open terrain, maybe 6 minutes at full speed. In this jungle, 40 minutes. 40 minutes of blind movement. 40 minutes of vulnerability. 40 minutes where any number of things could go catastrophically wrong. The chronometers tick down toward the moment when either salvation arrives or tragedy becomes complete. At the front of Charlie Company's position, the North Vietnamese assault builds toward final push. Bunker complex eruption of muzzle flashes and explosions and screaming. The Americans return fire with everything they have left. Which is not enough. Never enough. The mathematics have run their course. This is the end, except the mathematics fail to account for one variable. 40 minutes ago, 200 men on the other side of the jungle said that's not what the 11th Cavalry does. 40 minutes ago, Captain John Poindexter committed to a decision that could not be recalled. And now, at the exact moment when North Vietnamese soldiers begin to move from bunkers toward final assault positions, the jungle itself seems to explode. M113s burst from the tree line. Aluminum hulls painted with scratches and gouges from 4 kilometers of jungle penetration, 3-gun ACAV configuration hammering, 50 caliber machine guns, M60 machine guns, main guns, engines roaring, tracks throwing mud and vegetation. The vehicles don't slow down to assess the situation. They charge directly into the North Vietnamese positions, using their hulls as shields, their weapons as hammers, their momentum as battering rams. The effect is instantaneous and total. North Vietnamese soldiers, prepared for final assault against a surrounded enemy, find themselves taking fire from an unexpected direction. Their carefully prepared bunker complex, positioned to massacre Charlie Company, becomes a trap with the trappers inside. The M113s methodically destroy bunker after bunker. The survivors of Charlie Company later describe watching this as a miracle. One moment they're dying. The next moment, the cavalry literally arrives. The butcher's bill totals at the end. 2 Alpha Troop soldiers killed, approximately 20 wounded. Charlie Company survivors, approximately 100. The North Vietnamese bunker complex that could have ambushed other units, destroyed. Captain Poindexter will later reflect on the decision. The choice, to me, was one of certainty of suffering versus a lifetime of guilt. That's not what the 11th Cavalry does. But in 1970, there are no medals. No recognition beyond the unit. The men go home to an America that doesn't want to hear about Vietnam, doesn't want to know about cavalry rescues or green dragons or desperate charges through the jungle. They put away their uniforms, rarely speak of their service, move on with their lives, start families, build careers. The uniforms go into closets and the stories go into silence. But Captain John Poindexter cannot let go. 7 years he spends tracking down his troopers, gathering their stories, fighting Pentagon bureaucracy for recognition. In 2003, he discovers that men he recommended for decorations never received them. The paperwork lost or ignored in the chaos of war's end and America's desire to forget. He fights. For years he fights. Not for himself. For the 200 men who said yes when he asked them to drive through the jungle toward almost certain death. For the 100 men who survived because someone refused to accept that nothing could be done. In 2009, President Barack Obama stands in the White House. 86 veterans of Alpha Troop attend the ceremony, many reuniting for the first time in 40 years. The Presidential Unit Citation, one of only about 100 awarded since World War II, finally recognizes what happened on March 26, 1970. President Obama speaks words that apply to far more than one unit on one day. After all these years, why honor this heroism now? The answer is simple: because we must, because we have a sacred obligation. Many of our Vietnam vets put away their medals, rarely spoke of their service, and moved on. They started families and careers. One of the saddest episodes in American history was the fact that these vets were often shunned and neglected, even demonized, when they came home. That was a national disgrace. The ceremony corrects one small injustice, but multiply that injustice by every M113 crew that served, every driver who learned their job when their predecessor was killed, every gunner who stood exposed because that's where the gun was mounted, every soldier who rode inside an aluminum box knowing that mines accounted for 73% of losses, everyone who made it home to an America that didn't want to hear their stories. Ralph Axe of the 25th Infantry Division learned to drive an M113 his first day in Vietnam when the prior operator was killed. His unit conducted route clearance patrols between Saigon and outposts like Cu Chi, Dao Tieng, and Tay Ninh, searching for mines, enduring ambushes. He earned 3 Purple Hearts. The first, when his position was overrun and defensive air support called in on their own position, showered him with shrapnel in chest and stomach. The second, when he was shot in the foot during dismounted patrol, breaking heel and ankle. Doctors reasoned an APC driver didn't need to walk to fight. The third, when mortar fragments shattered his knee while helping his gunner replace an overheated .50 caliber barrel. When he returned home, he tried to join the veterans of foreign wars. Members told him Vietnam wasn't a real war. He kept his uniforms locked away, left service off job applications. Decades passed before he began to address the trauma publicly, before he used his perspective to counsel accident survivors, children with cancer, those dealing with substance abuse. Before he could speak about the thing, he survived. The statistics tell their own story. Over 80,000 M113s produced across all variants, used by over 50 countries. More than 40 variants developed. In Vietnam alone, approximately 8,000 M113s lost. U.S., ARVN, and Australian combined. Between November 1967 and March 1970, 1,342 M113s lost to landmines in just 28 months. 73% of all vehicle losses came from mines. Not the RPGs that everyone remembers, not the recoilless rifles, not direct combat, buried explosives, the invisible enemy. In the final North Vietnamese offensive of 1975, 1,381 ARVN M113s destroyed and captured. Hundreds ended up in North Vietnamese hands. Many were ACAV variants with the full 3-gun configuration. Some were subsequently used in the Cambodian-Vietnamese War of 1978 to 1989. The Green Dragon that once scattered the Viet Cong became a prize of war displayed in museums across Vietnam as symbol of victory over American technology. The Vietnamese perspective completes the circle of this story. In 1962, the M113 created shock and panic. The Rồng Xanh caused guerrillas to flee. The combination of armor, speed, mounted weapons, amphibious capabilities seemed overwhelming. 7 months later at Ap Bac, that perception shattered. 14 dead gunners taught both sides that the Green Dragon could be killed. The Viet Cong published training manuals. Attack on M113 APC. Systematic study of vulnerabilities. Best weapons. Optimal tactics. Vulnerable points. Engagement ranges. The transformation from fear to analysis to mastery. By the latter stages of war, North Vietnamese forces possessed the tactical knowledge and weapons to counter the M113 effectively. The RPG-7 with doubled range and tripled penetration, mines as primary weapon, recoilless rifles, heavy machine guns. The psychological advantage shifted from terror weapon to known quantity, from unstoppable to merely dangerous. Post-war Vietnamese museums display captured M113s as trophies. The Ap Bac Museum celebrates the first major Viet Cong victory over the vehicles. The Vietnam Military History Museum in Hanoi includes M113s in the Garden of Broken Toys outdoor exhibition. The War Remnants Museum in Ho Chi Minh City displays them alongside helicopters and tanks as evidence of Vietnamese victory. The framing is clear. American technology could not overcome Vietnamese determination. The most sophisticated armored vehicle met the simplest buried mine, and the mine won. The message serves national narrative, but the presence of these vehicles in museums also serves as recognition. You don't preserve and display equipment you considered insignificant. The M113 mattered enough to memorialize. The technical assessments from military analysts paint complex pictures. The military channel named the M113 the most significant infantry vehicle in history. Praise for mobility, reliability, versatility in jungle terrain. Multiple sources call it the most effective armored fighting vehicle of the Vietnam War. But post-war analyses highlight limitations. Operation Desert Storm in 1991 revealed the M113A2's inability to sustain operational tempo, insufficient internal space, and low survivability. A.U.S. Army assessment in 2016 concluded that M113 lacks force protection and survivability required for modern operations, called it an obsolete platform unsuitable for combat in the 21st century. Yet, despite obsolescence, over 80,000 produced units continue serving in 50-plus countries. 60-plus year service life demonstrates exceptional design adaptability. Low cost at $22,000 per vehicle in the 1960s. Reliability. Ease of maintenance. These ensure continued use even as Western armies replace it with modern vehicles. The legacy extends beyond the vehicle itself to doctrine and tactics. The ACAV conversion represents rare bottom-up innovation. Field modifications by troops became standardized by military. The evolution from battle taxi to fighting vehicle influenced development of infantry fighting vehicle concept. The Bradley IFV of the 1980s incorporated lessons learned. Never again would a vehicle put crew in exposed positions without protection. Never again would armor be sacrificed for weight savings in areas prone to mine strikes. The M113's failures taught as much as its successes. Every flaw revealed in Vietnamese jungles shaped every armored vehicle that followed. The blood-purchased knowledge that designers in California could never simulate in testing. For the veterans who served in them, the M113 remains deeply personal. James Murray of the 11th ACR describes field conditions. Dirty, hot, and cold during monsoon season, plus fearful at times. Their job was to search and destroy, look for the enemy, and engage. During the day, they had foot patrol in the jungle looking for enemy base camps. At night, they set up perimeters with vehicles every night. If you were on vehicle, you pulled guard duty, awake 2 hours, sleep 2 hours, routinely for 4 to 6 weeks straight. Inside the ACAV, ammo stacked 2 layers deep and wall to wall in the troop compartment. Space filled with crew's kit bags, spare gun barrels, water, sea rations, crew weapons, grenades, toolbox, and towing cables. Home and weapon and coffin potential all in one aluminum box. Captain Howie Bachman served 2 tours. First as ARVN Armored Cavalry Advisor. Second as Company Commander of 3-5 Cavalry, Dreadnought Charlie. As advisor, he gained respect by asking for chopsticks instead of fork at chow time. Near the end of his first tour, the vehicle in front hit by anti-tank rocket wiped out a platoon of Montagnards. He stepped in when Vietnamese wouldn't touch bodies due to cultural prejudice. As company commander, he ate what his men ate, slept where they slept, refused evacuation after Claymore explosion injured his hand. Years later, he wrote a book for his grandchildren, Vietnam ×3. His wife added her perspective at the end of each chapter about dealing with his deployments. His advice to veterans echoes across the decades. It is important to capture that because everyone has a different, unique story. Before we get so old that we don't remember everything, it would be a good idea to write it down. The 11th Armored Cavalry veterans of Vietnam and Cambodia hold annual reunions. 86-year-old men in their 70s and 80s gathering in Las Vegas. Visiting Fort Irwin to connect with active duty regiment. Sharing stories that they couldn't share for decades. The Black Horse Association website. The Library of Congress Veterans History Project with 27,000 Vietnam veterans recordings, videos, photographs, used by Ken Burns' documentary The Vietnam War in 2017, the ongoing collection of stories 50 plus years after war ended, because the stories matter, because the men matter, because what they survived and what they lost and what they learned matters to understanding not just a war but a generation. The M113 in Vietnam represents transformation, from revolutionary design to battlefield reality, from initial shock to harsh adaptation, from vulnerable target to effective weapon, from forgotten service to remembered sacrifice. The vehicle that American advisors thought would fail, that the Viet Cong initially fled from, that killed 14 gunners at Ap Bac, that the ARVN modified with gun shields from salvaged ships, that the 11th ACR turned into the 3-gun ACAV, that burst through the tree line at Suoi Tre to save a fire support base, that charged through monsoon rain at Long Tan with lights blazing. That Alpha Troop drove through 4 kilometers of jungle to rescue 100 men. The Green Dragon that cost 8,000 vehicles and thousands of lives. That taught enemies how to fight it. That appears in Vietnamese museums as symbol of victory. That remains in service worldwide 60 years after introduction. That shaped every armored vehicle that followed. In the end, the M113 story is not about aluminum or diesel engines or 50 caliber machine guns. It's about the men who drove them, the men who died in them, the men who survived them. Ralph Axe learning to drive when his predecessor was killed, Captain Poindexter fighting 7 years for recognition, the 86 veterans gathering at the White House after 40 years of silence, the thousands more who never received recognition, who came home to an America that didn't want their stories, who locked away their uniforms and their memories and their trauma, who finally, slowly began to speak, to write, to teach, to remember not just the vehicle, but the values, not just the combat, but the courage, not just the war, but the warriors. President Obama concluded his remarks at the 29 ceremony with words that transcend one unit. These troopers who put themselves in the line of fire, using their tanks and vehicles to shield those trapped Americans, the loaders who kept the ammunition coming, and the gunners who never let up. And when one of those gunners went down, the soldier who jumped into his place. This is who served in the M113s. This is who the statistics represent. This is why the story matters. Not because the vehicle was perfect. It wasn't. Not because the tactics were flawless. They weren't. Not because the war was righteous. History debates that still. But because when 100 men faced annihilation in War Zone C, 200 men said that's not what the 11th Cavalry does and drove through the jungle to bring them home. The Green Dragon legacy lives in every veteran who served, in every student who studies the evolution of armored warfare, in every engineer who designs protection for crew members, in every tactician who understands that adaptation determines survival, in every historian who documents not just victories but struggles, not just successes but costs, not just technology but humanity. The M113 arrived in Vietnam in March 1962 as revolutionary design, left Vietnam in April 1975 as cautionary tale and proven workhorse combined, saved thousands of lives, cost thousands of lives, changed doctrine, changed tactics, changed the men who served in them. The aluminum box on tracks that nobody expected to work became the most significant infantry vehicle in history, not despite its flaws, but because of how troops and enemies adapted to them. Not because it was invincible, but because it was just good enough and those who used it were just brave enough, and that combination, against all odds and expectations, was enough.